I made this beginner-friendly terrarium in about 20 minutes with almost no money and almost no prior planning whatsoever. So sit back, relax, and let me take you through step by step how I did it, and, if you're lucky, there'll be a lot less glare than usual. I picked up this uniquely shaped jar quite a while back at the thrift store for about $1.25. I pre-cleaned it and removed all fingerprint oil before we started our build. I picked up this nice crystal in addition to some geodes on a hike with my fiance a few years back. It doesn't exactly hold itself upright in the position that I want, so I used some gel type super glue to adhere a support stone on it to help it hold it in the correct angle. Next, I started to add some sterilized gravel to create a drainage layer. I recommend that you use the correct tool, such as a funnel, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning, so I used a spoon. I wouldn't recommend doing that. As this terrarium is going to be predominantly moss and only a few shallow rooting plants, we don't need much of a drainage layer. I did decide to start using the correct tool for this to flatten it out, to remind myself that just because it's a cheap design doesn't mean that we get to half-ass it. Next, we have the substrate barrier. Although window screen mesh and weed matting is your best option, I like to take a piece of plastic and stab a bunch of holes into it because my therapist told me that I need to have positive outlets for rage. It also keeps the price down. Because this piece of plastic is quite rigid, I'm going to add some extra gravel on top to weigh it down. The substrate barrier impedes substrate from mixing in with the gravel, and if your substrate barrier is all kinked and annoying, it's not very effective now, is it? Next, we are going to add our custom-made ABG mix because it is astronomically cheaper than buying pre-made and customizable to the needs of your specific terrarium. I would still recommend against using a spoon for this, however, in all honesty, it worked out pretty nice. As always, we do want to compact the soil a bit and angle it up towards the back to facilitate illusory depth. Once we get a decent amount of soil in, we're going to add our crystal cliff, repack it down, tidy up a bit, and add some extra soil up front to support. With the soil compacted down, I'm going to be adding a little bit extra in the back for more depth and to raise some height so that the low-lying plants and moss that will be going on that side are a bit more visible and stick out. Despite already having a good amount of ABG media in the terrarium, I'm going to be building up this corner real quick on the, viewers left, stage right, this corner thing. It's over there. Despite predominantly using thread moss in my builds because I like how it grows and how easy it is to trim, today we are going to be using predominantly haircap moss because I found some that was going through its reproductive cycle. I'll throw up a diagram here really briefly, but essentially, we still have to clean it off, all that jazz. It's just not grown out like I normally do for my thread moss. Here's some haircap moss without the sporophyte, and although normally it would be a bit taller, it will grow taller in terrarium conditions. I, on the other hand, live in the desert. I honestly don't even know how it was surviving outside. Now that we're about 6 minutes in, we should probably start planting for the 4 of you that are still around. Although not nearly as important as with the sideways bottles, we still want to predominantly work from the far end towards the opening, as that'll be a lot easier. We do want to push the moss down a bit into the ABG soil. That's not really going to hurt it. It actually helps it wick up moisture and nutrients. The sporophytes that are on it probably will be fine. I'm sure 1 or 2 gets crushed, but it's not all that big of a deal when you have this many in an enclosed space. Here's a brief top view of the progress we've made, which is probably not all that helpful to you since I record on my phone. Because I ran out of haircap moss, we are now going to fill in the remaining sections with thread moss. I left the area under the cliff intentionally bare in case I ran out. My thought pattern being that when the thread moss grows, it'll hopefully serpentine up through the microcrystals and texture of the large cliff and kind of wrap around it. When you break moss up, it does grow in faster, and when I put in the cuttings that I normally use, it does grow in faster as well to create kind of like a wave. But by using these large chunks, I'm kind of liking the carpet grass texture that we will be getting. As you can see with my Blair Witch shaky cam, the two different species have a distinctly different color and texture. Hopefully one doesn't outcompete the other. In my experience, thread moss does kind of outcompete haircat moss, but hopefully there's so much haircat moss and the thread moss is in an isolated area that I can keep up on it with trimming and, general manicuring and maintenance. Next, we're going to start adding in some gravel around the base. The gravel where I live does have some minor quartz deposits in it. It's all over the desert. I was a bit torn on whether or not to leave it as is with it kind of jutting out, kind of like Vasquez rocks. I do like that, but at the same time I feel even though that is a natural, area, this by adding in some smaller stones around the base does look a little bit more natural. If I were to have left it, the moss would eventually kind of cover up and soften that edge, but this way it looks kind of like it's done when it's done. Even now that it's completed and I've had it sitting on my shelf for about a week, I'm still not really sure. I think no matter which option I picked, I would always have that question of what if I did it the other way. But this is what I did, so this is how it looks. Likewise with the stone, I was a bit torn on whether or not I should add this branch. It does kind of instantly nuke my sense of scale. However, without it, it was kind of boring, and it did kind of have a natural curve that followed the rolling hill of the back soil. So I decided to add it under the, stipulation that I would also add a vining plant in that area, so that it kind of looked like, it had died and then a new growth was coming out. Now that I knew how I wanted the twig, I decided to add some oak leaf creeping fig that also had a natural curve in it. At least, for the time being. It'll of course grow and fill out and cover the entire area, and I'll have to keep trimming it back. For the time being, I contemplate adding a larger cutting of oak leaf creeping fig up front. However, I decided to take it out since the other piece is just going to fill in anyways, and I had something else that I could use that piece on. For the section of exposed soil in the back corner, I decided to add 2 cuttings of Photonia, first white veined and then red veined. My idea here is to kind of replicate, some vegetative growth like large bushes or trees. Obviously, there's no trees that look like that, but it adds some, we've already added stuff other than just the rolling moss grass hill, so might as well just go full tilt with it. We do want to push the cutting down as deep into the soil as we can, almost all the way up to the leaves, which is why I put a little hole in the soil with the tweezers. This way, maximum moisture can wick into it prior to the root growth so that it doesn't wilt or dry out at all. And anywhere along that stem can produce roots. It will almost always be towards the bottom, but it never hurts to have extra surface area available. Now it is time for my favorite part, which is adding the springtails. I almost exclusively use the tropical white ones. There is a super small species of blue springtails which I used in the past. However, I only had like 10 of them, so I dumped them into a very large vivarium and was never able to catch any to, breed out and use in other projects. So I'll probably get some eventually in the future. There's also a pretty cool species of large pink springtail that probably would have looked pretty nice in this. However, every single time I've ordered springtails online, like the box comes with a sticker that says live animals, this side up, and my post office decides to read that and then be like, no. I've had them delivered into the mailbox so that they could get sunbaked. I've had them delivered upside down with dents in the box. And I've had them like sent back to the shipper and coming to my local post office and then back to like Nebraska and then back for, an extra week of just chilling in transit. So that's nice. Here we are about a week after the terrarium's initial creation. Some new sporophytes have started to form. None of the old ones have popped yet. I really don't know how long that's going to take, especially since I don't know how long after their formation I harvested them. Either way, I like it.